Now let's listen to the scriptures and see what God has to say for us. Today's scripture is taken from John 14, the first 17 verses. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God? Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and that the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing this work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. Or at least believe on the evidence of the works themselves. Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. You may ask me for anything in my name, and I will do it. If you love me, keep my commands. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you know him, for he lives with you and will be in you.
We love to travel, and so over the years, we have enjoyed planning our vacation trips, deciding on our destination, and mapping out the route that we will take. We used to do this with the trusty old atlas. Some of you may recognize this, right? Used to have an atlas that we did this with, poring over the various maps, and at times asking, even getting more maps to find our way. In more recent years, however, we have started using our GPS, and most recently, the GPS with on our smartphones. And we've been impressed that in most cases, our GPS leads us on our way as we follow the voice. Particularly, we found it useful in cities. In the fall of 2012, we made a trip to Europe to see our daughter who was studying a semester abroad. So we rented a car so we could travel to several countries, and we also rented a GPS to help us find our way. Our GPS was invaluable as we maneuvered the streets of Brussels and then headed south into France. Eventually, we arrived safely at our hotel in Paris. After several days there, where we used public transportation, we got back in our rental car, and our GPS guided us through the heart of Paris, through the countryside of France, through the tunnels through the Alps, until we found our way into a small Italian coastal city one afternoon. We had carefully entered the address, right, of our hotel, and after a couple wrong turns, we finally turned onto our correct street. It was called Via Paulay. Now, this street was a very narrow, steep cobblestone street, but the sign was there, and we trustingly proceeded onto it as instructed by our GPS. At the top of the hill, we saw number 1 on the side of the house, and expecting to keep going to our destination, which was number 5, but the street ended. Even though our GPS kept saying, keep going, there were only stairs there. No way forward. So Dennis carefully maneuvered the car back down the narrow street, and luckily our daughter had a phone, so we could call the hotel, and the owner answered, and he said, just stay there, I'm coming. So he arrived a few minutes later on a motor scooter with instructions to us simply to follow him, and he would show us the way. And after quite a few ups and downs and twists and turns, we did finally arrive at our destination. Our GPS had failed us, but a human person had showed us the way. In our text for today, we find the disciples feeling lost and uncertain about the way forward. For at the beginning of John 14, it is Thursday evening, the night before Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus knows that he will soon leave this world, and so he is trying to prepare his disciples for the events that are going to transpire. They have just finished their Passover meal, the last meal that they will have together. The betrayer, Judas, has left, and Jesus has just told Peter that he will deny him 3 times. Jesus tells them that he will be leaving them, but they will not be able to follow him now, although they will at some point. And so Jesus is trying to give his disciples these last-minute instructions on how they are going to live as he taught them without his presence among them. It is in this context that he begins by trying to reassure them by saying, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me." No need to let what's going to happen disturb you. I'm thinking, what? The disciples must have asked, what? Do not let our hearts be troubled. Are you kidding? You have just told us that you're going to die and you're going to leave us. No doubt these disciples were completely knocked off balance. They had been following Jesus for 3 years and had committed themselves to him. Without him, what would the way forward look like? A future without Jesus? Is that even possible? They would be lost without Jesus. And so they try to cling to something they can hold on to. Let not your hearts be troubled. But their hearts were torn and disturbed as they heard Jesus talk about going away. Certainly they had glimpsed at some of what Jesus' message and vision and mission were all about, but they didn't really understand all that. They had been looking for this Messiah and believed that they had found him. They believed that this Jesus, their Messiah, would liberate the people from their occupation and oppression of the Roman rulers. They believed that this Messiah would usher in an eternal kingdom of peace. Yet now, this Messiah was talking about going away and preparing places and coming back. Oh, that all seems very confusing. And as if to add insult to injury, Jesus implies that they should know what he's talking about. He actually said they would know the way to follow. So we have brave, practical Thomas steps forward and asks a question. But Jesus, actually, we have no idea where you're going, so how can we know the way? Philip also, confused and feeling lost, wanted to know the way forward, And so he makes this request, show us the Father, and that will be enough. Philip was trying to find something that they could sustain them for the future. If Jesus would just give some practical teachings to follow, perhaps 7 habits for successful living, or 9 steps for a fruitful life, or perhaps 10 rules to stay on the right path. Just show us the way, they were asking Jesus. Just show us the way. We too hear these words of Jesus. Let not your hearts be troubled. No doubt that most of us can intuitively understand what the disciples were going through, because each of us has had these moments too, when our hearts are not only deeply troubled, but downright disturbed and upset, and we feel lost. When the unknown future looms before us, when we are confronted by the powers of violence and death, and we are gripped with fear and confusion, at our wits' end, desperate for some hope that things will get better, that we will be able to see our way forward. We certainly experience troubling times in our personal lives when we find ourselves looking for a new way, particularly when we are confronted with various losses that we experience in life. We look for a way forward when death separates us from a loved one, when the doctor says, you have cancer, when our bodies and minds are no longer vibrant and working as we wished, when relationships are broken, when our job is terminated, when once again the rains fail to come. In these times of loss, when the future seems uncertain, it's easy to let fear take hold. The way forward seems dim. We also may be troubled when it appears that our world is falling apart, that the evil has taken control of everything, when innocent people are senselessly killed, when we can no longer feel secure in places we thought were safe, when vulnerable people are harmed and taken advantage of. We feel lost and wonder what to do, how to respond, where to find hope. What is the way forward? And so we ask the same questions that the disciples asked Jesus. Where is God? How can I know the way? How can I know the way to God? We want some reassurance, some glimmer of hope for a way forward into an unknown future. In their distress, Jesus says to his disciples, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to God the Father except through me. Me, Jesus, right here in front of you. Me, Jesus, talking to you. Me, Jesus, who makes the Father and the future known to you. I am the way, Jesus tells his disciples. And Jesus tells them that they know already. They know enough already because they already know him. They already have this intimate, close relationship with Jesus, and he's the way. They've been with Jesus and have witnessed to all he's done. They were there when he changed the water into wine. They witnessed the healing of the man by the pool of Bethesda. They saw Jesus feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. They saw him walk on water. They saw him restore the sight of the man born blind. And they saw him raise Lazarus from the dead. So Jesus tells his disciples, you know me. You know enough. You know that I am the way. And if you know me, you will know the Father also who dwells in me. Jesus is intimately connected to God. We see this at the very beginning of John's gospel, as John describes the Word becoming flesh and dwelling among us that we might have life. This Jesus the only begotten Son, who has made God known. If you have seen Jesus, you have seen God and know what God looks like and what God is up to and what is God for. Jesus, the ultimate revealer of God to us. Jesus knows that God will provide whatever we need, a place, a home. Jesus provides a permanent place of abiding with God for all who trust in him. The future is secure. His reference to "in my Father's house" is more than just a heavenly residence. Jesus is speaking about this relationship of indwelling between God and Jesus, a relationship that's open to all believers that are included in this. Jesus is the way. Jesus is the connection for us to God. "I am the way" has its roots in the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, especially in the book of Proverbs. Wisdom in the book of Proverbs is often described as the way. Proverbs 9:11 says, "I instruct you in the way of wisdom and lead you along straight paths." This word suggests an action of treading and trampling and calls to mind a well-worn path by constant use. The implication is that wisdom involves patterns of behavior, not just isolated acts, practices and patterns that keep us connected to our source. The purpose of this way is the formation of an interior disposition, a heart united to the ways of God. This path is viewed as a gift of the indwelling and guiding presence of God. The notion of the way also has deep roots in the biblical stories, including the journey of Israel through the Promised Land. In the Synoptic Gospels, we see the way as Jesus' journey from Galilee to Jerusalem, which the disciples also walked with him. In Acts, Luke notes that the Christian movement was called the Way, following on the way of Jesus. This is the new way of salvation, the new relationship with God, the new way of Jesus. The church developed as people joined to follow this way, the new way of Jesus. People like us who were making an active commitment to the person of Jesus. So we too are followers of the way, following Jesus himself, who is the gift from the very heart of God, whose earthly life models for us the way of discipleship and whose teachings guide us. Jesus, whose presence sustains and challenges us as we remain connected through the Spirit of truth that he has given us, the Advocate. This abiding Spirit that keeps us connected to our source and brings us life. Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. As we continue on our life journey, we ask and ask again these basic questions. Am I on the right track? And how can I know that God is in my life? The answer Jesus gives is both simple and profound. I am the way. And we grow into the answer as we live the months and years of life, as we walk toward faith, as we grow more deeply connected to Jesus in our inner being, and as we live our lives day by day, developing and renewing spiritual practices that keep us on the way. As I read your responses to our question for this sermon series, "Who is Jesus to me?" I heard you say and describe Jesus as the way. First, I heard your deep connection to Jesus as the way in the sense of his abiding presence. You wrote, "Jesus is walking beside me all the time. Jesus is the one who is with me. Jesus is my constant companion. Jesus resides within my heart and restores my whole soul, the sense of abiding presence that you have. And as you develop and deepen this connection, you describe Jesus as the way, providing you guidance and direction on your way. And you wrote, Jesus is a role model to guide my activity here on earth. I ask Jesus for guidance each day in making decisions. I believe that Jesus meant what he said and was talking to me about loving enemies, caring for the sick, and working to provide justice for the oppressed. Taking to heart Jesus' teaching and Jesus' modeling as you find your way in discipleship. And I also noted that Jesus' presence and direction are most keenly experienced when life is hard and your hearts are troubled. You wrote, Jesus is most keenly felt when I have been broken and cried out to him. A woman who missed her life companion wrote, living on the farm alone, Jesus gave me peace of heart and took away my fear. And a woman going through a difficult time in her life wrote, one day I very audibly heard a voice speaking to me saying, I did not come to take the stuff of life away from you, but to walk through it with you. Jesus' presence accompanying us on our way, particularly in moments of distress when our hearts are troubled. This is the promise of Jesus for us today and in the future. When your hearts are troubled and when the blood pressure is racing with anxiety, look to Jesus who says, I am the way. Jesus, the one who preached God's mercy and taught God's love, the one who healed the sick, made the lame to walk, opened blind eyes and conquered death, so that even the grave can no longer claim us. Jesus, who reveals what God looks like, what God desires, and who God is, a God of love for us and for the whole world. Jesus, the way, whose presence sustains and guides us, no matter the twists and turns our future paths may take. Jesus, the way that leads to life. May it be so. Amen.